Hello, hello, everybody. I see we've got someone joining us. Welcome to the Senior Living in Power Hour. Rick and I are really excited, waiting for all the folks to come in today. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting ourselves set up and doing a little tech check. And here we go. Perfect. Here we go. Do me a favor, Rachel. Could you put a little something in the chat, like a little thumbs up? Let us know if you can see the slide. And welcome to the Senior Living in Power Hour. It's good. And now we'll get rolling. We'll do, let's see, I'll do what's this? I'll give it on the screen properly so we can see it. Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've got a few minutes till we get rolling here. Thanks for joining us here at the Senior Living in Power Hour. I have Rick Boothman here. We're really excited for our presentation today. It's amazing we're already halfway through the year. How do we get halfway through the year? Where did time go?
I don't know.
Slow down.
When you're my age, it goes fast.
No, it doesn't. It's going extra fast. If someone doesn't mind and can stick into the chat, that they can see the screen, that they're seeing the presentation, that would be great. Welcome, welcome. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. Great. Thank you, Debbie. It's great to see you. Great to see all our other friends who are joining us today. We're going to get started here in a couple of minutes, let people roll in. We are hosting at a different time today. Normally we are a 1 p.m. start time. So thanks for everybody shifting your schedule. And you're here in beautiful Memphis, Tennessee with Rick Boothman and Rebecca Edelman. So thank you again for being here. And we're going to get rolling here in just a couple of minutes to season 3, episode 6 of this award-winning Senior Living in Power Hours. So excited for everyone to join us. Okay, let me get things ready to roll and then people can roll in as they will. Let's see. Hold on, everyone. It's okay. Let me see how to get us back into the presentation mode. Oh, that's okay too, huh?
Sure.
Yeah, that works. I think that will work. Well, listen, welcome everybody to the Senior Living in Power Hour for June. I am just thrilled to be joined by Rick Boothman. We're going to go into a lot more details about Rick, about his history, and about what he's created and about what Rick and I are brewing up over here in Memphis, Tennessee in the senior living space. So again, we know that you have lots of ways you can spend an hour of your Friday morning, and we're really happy that you are spending it with us. So it's really great to see everybody. Let's kind of get rolling. Let me see if I can make this work. Hold on. Do it here. Perfect. We changed the screen look. Can you tell me you're still, someone send me a little note, tell me you can still see our screen and that you're seeing the blueprint for resolution. Someone give us a little thumbs up over there. Thank you. Okay. Well, again, I am joined by Rick Boothman. I'm Rebecca Edelman. We're going to be talking today about a blueprint for resolution. We're going to be talking about how to resolve conflicts, Rick's history in developing and creating and being the architect of the Michigan model and that program, and how we are working on translating and adapting the Michigan model in the senior living space. So that's why we're here today. We're going to be talking about communication, transparency, and risk in senior living with Rick Boothman. Before we get rolling, for those of you who do try and obtain any kind of continuing education credit, we've had many of the folks who've joined us very successful at that. And having these objectives, I think, helps. So what we're going to be talking about today in terms of our program objectives, we're going to learn about the origin and the mission of the Michigan model with Rick, and the transformative impact of communication resolution programs in healthcare. We're going to talk about the adaptation of those CRP principles for senior living, and then we're going to discuss our forward-looking vision of how CRPs in senior living can help us in so many ways, not just reduce risks and lawsuits and claims, but really result in improved care and improved outcomes and better quality. So that's what we're here for. You know, something occurred to me sort of off the fly. Be thinking about this as I kind of go through the next couple of slides. Put in the chat if you've ever heard or know what a CRP is, right? If you know or have heard of a communication resolution program, that would be kind of, I think, interesting for us to know. So, or at least interesting for me to know. So no program with one lawyer and now two lawyers would be complete without a short disclosure and disclaimer. We're not giving anybody legal advice. Everything you see here today is as is. So if you have any questions that might be unique to your state about anything we're talking, please go and consult with your attorney or an attorney. So anyway, so this is me. I'm your hostess today. And for those of you who know me, I'm going to buzz through this, even for those of you who don't know me. But so you are here in our offices in Memphis, Tennessee. I am Rebecca Edelman and the founder of Edelman Firm. And for, I don't know, 35 years or so, maybe even a little longer, I have focused my practice on defending healthcare, focused on senior living, but involved in really the defense of healthcare, senior living, in the insurance space. I do some business litigation, employment things, but this is kind of what I do is show up in the senior living and healthcare space, advocating and representing senior living. I'm also the founder of GuidePath. GuidePath is a culture change and risk management national and now international certification program for senior living. Please go check it out. You'll have some resources here at the end. I do a lot of different things. I'm an arbitrator. I do mediation. I am, and a shout out to my friends and colleagues at Bridge the Gap. If you guys don't know who Bridge the Gap is, take a look at Bridge the Gap podcast. These guys at Bridge the Gap have created a platform for sharing really amazing information on senior living. So shout out to my friends and colleagues and incredible educators at Bridge the Gap. Go check them out. I've been a Bridge the Gap ambassador now for a couple of years, and it's really been a highlight of my career. I do speaking, I do all sorts of stuff. And a fun fact is I am fluent in Francais. So maybe you'll also share a fun fact. Do you have any fun facts about you, Rick?
No.
Yes, you do. I'm sure you have a fun fact about yourself. So again, I'm here with Rick. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but all I can say is that as my interest over the decades in really trying to mitigate risk and move down the risk spectrum and improve care and resolve conflicts in ways that really make sense out of the courtroom, I encountered Rick's work and his very prolific writing and work on CRPs. And again, he's going to talk to you more about it. So because he was from from Ann Arbor and is a Michigan man, and of course, for those of you who know me, I can't probably at least once a day I remind people that I went to University of Michigan and that my parents went to the University of Michigan. So I figured I might have a shot reaching out to Rick Boothman since he was a Michigan man to see if he could help me in blueprinting and architecting something for senior living. So anyway, so that's what we're doing, and I've been blessed these past many months to be working with him and being mentored by him, and just, I mean, really, you just couldn't be a nicer guy. You just really are.
Well,
You
you're
really
not.
are just like,
you're-
no, you really like,
You're not
you're a
married.
nice guy.
You're not married to me, so
I
make a different opinion.
If I'm younger, I would be. Anyway, so yeah, that might be true. So I'm going to turn this over to Rick. It's so fun to have him in my office. We've enjoyed ourselves this last couple of days, doing a lot of really interesting work and having great conversations and doing a lot of learning. So Rick, it's you now. I'm just gonna, now it's really you. Like the rest of this is mostly you, okay?
Well, maybe not, but we'll see. Um, Thank you for the invite. Thank you for even more for the interest in this in senior living. I will confess that I have limited engagement with the senior living community and with the issues involved, although I'm getting more every day because we now have family members involved in that, and I'm seeing it up front. I started my adult life as a trial lawyer. And it was always in clinical medicine. So I was representing, and I was blessed to represent a wide range of clients, everything from a 50-bed hospital in the center of Detroit to the University of Michigan and others in Michigan and Ohio. But I will say, and actually going back through my history with Rebecca yesterday, it was really clear that the genesis of what we did at the University of Michigan really started in my very first year as a trial lawyer. One of the first cases that I had, that I tried, I was maybe a year and a half out of law school. And it occurred to me, sitting in a courtroom in Detroit in Wayne County Circuit Court, it occurred to me that the patient who sued my client as we sat in this courtroom had not spoken to each other for 7 years. And here we were in front of a jury, deselected for any sophistication in the medicine. So I was acutely aware of the fact that my surgeon was never going to be judged by a jury of his peers. But as I sat there, I thought, how strange this is. We had already spent 6 figures, even in those days, in defense costs. But years had gone by with these two parties in litigation. I had taken over the case when I joined my first law firm. And here I was as a brand new trial lawyer in my first solo trial, litigating this case. And thankfully I won. Probably wouldn't talk about it if I didn't. But thankfully I won. But as the jury was filing out of the jury box, this patient, for the very first time in 7 years, spoke to my client directly. And she leaned around the podium and she said to him, if I had known everything I heard in this courtroom, I would never have sued you. That was literally my introduction to what then became, as I started connecting the dots, what became a different way of approaching things at the University of Michigan. I then continued to defend cases, and I was very successful in Michigan and Ohio and had really superb clients, but kept thinking to myself, especially in medical malpractice and especially in the Midwest, the number of trials compared to the way lawsuits were handled and ultimately settled, that statistic made little sense. I think if you look at any of the most of the states in the country, the settlement rate runs around 90%. So we were spending years going through discovery, very expensive discovery, running up 6 figures of costs, and still settling cases on the courthouse steps. And the really odd part to me, there were two disconnects. One was we didn't really need, as a defense lawyer, we didn't really need much discovery to know if we should be apologizing or if we should be defending the case. And that decision, that question of should we defend the case, was never actually raised. As we got assignments as trial lawyers, the implicit assignment was to assemble the best defense you could. And the whole reaction was to a patient's injury was defensive in that sense. I realized first that that was a lot of needless time and expense because as a health system, for instance, we had all the information we needed to at least evaluate the quality of the care. We didn't need a courtroom to tell us if we made a preventable mistake or not. Much of our discovery from the defense side was really to figure out how much the patient knew or the plaintiff knew, and kind of lie in the weeds and that sort of thing. The other thing is that there is an enormous difference between these two questions. Is this case defensible? And are we proud of this care and should we be defending it? And that is just an enormous difference because is this case defensible is a lawyer's question, right? And implicit in that is a whole series of factors involved. Can I defend this case? Can I find an expert? Can I pay somebody enough money to say what I need them to say in a courtroom to defend this case? And how do the facts align? What does the jury look like? It's all about winning or losing. And that's by design. I think people who say that our litigation system is broken are really off the mark. I think we have been for too long assigning a function to the litigation system that it was never intended to serve. Litigation is not a means for deciding whether or not the care was good and should there be clinical improvement. Litigation was a social expedient for ending a dispute between citizens that hasn't been amenable to ending in any other way. So as I thought about that and I thought about my own role in it, I actually started to feel a little guilty as I graduated through the ranks of trial lawyers and gained more and more experience and more success. I became better at it. And I realized that I was able to outlawyer many lawyers, but it wasn't necessarily the sensible way. The other thing that I came to realize is that the whole defensiveness and the whole mechanism for defending actually created barriers to improvement. And common sense should tell us all, aside from the morals and the ethics of it, common sense should tell us all that as bad as the injury is to the patient whose case is on our desk at any moment, the more important patient is the one we haven't hurt yet. Or in the senior living space, the more important person is the resident we haven't hurt yet. If it happened to one, it can happen to another. And I started to feel actually complicit in perpetuating the problem. I have represented doctors who were literally sued for 21 times. And I wasn't proud of the fact that I was able to get successful resolutions or successful closure of those cases because they were just going back and nobody was actually taking lessons to be learned. So it's a long way of saying that in 2001, after starting in practice in 1980, forming my own law firm and that sort of thing, our flagship client, the university, called me and asked me for some help to deal with some internal upheaval. And as I sat down with the general counsel and then other people, the head of insurance and those folks, I said to them, what do you need a courtroom for in 99% of these cases? You've got all the internal resources to come to a valued judgment about whether it's a case we should be defending or not. And there's a cost of defending care that we're not proud of. Because think about the mixed messages you're sending to the clinical staff across the board. So I actually, before I even took this job at the university, I actually said to them, can we agree on 3 principles? The first principle is that if we harmed a patient through unreasonable medical care, because the law doesn't hold any of us to optimal care or optimal behavior. As long as we're reasonable, it should be appropriate. So if we hurt anybody through inappropriate care, it is the ethic of the University of Michigan to move forward and apologize and do their best to make it right. That was the first principle. But the second principle was absolutely as important as the first. We ask much of our clinical staff who are laboring every day in an inherently dangerous environment. You can't give an antibiotic to a kid for his first ear infection without danger, without risk. And we can't control all those risks. So it's inherently a dangerous thing. We ask a lot of those folks, don't they deserve support when their care was reasonable and they still had a bad outcome?
Mm-hmm.
So that had to be the second pillar, because we had to gain the confidence of our clinical staff to believe that good things would happen if they talked to risk management and they came forward with a problem. And then the third was the most controversial in 2001, and that was that we would route cases that came to us for lessons learned immediately. We would expedite that. Now, why was that controversial? Because the way the statutes were set up in Michigan and most other states, it makes it look like there's a different set of statutes for risk management, work in anticipation of litigation, versus activities that are expressly designed for patient safety. What happens when you blend them? What happens if you cross this? And we didn't know the answer, and I still don't know the answer to that. There is little precedent in the law about whether or not mixing these purposes makes a difference, but who cares? Because if you adhere to the first two principles, we're going to be at the trying to settle a case if we've concluded that the care fell below our own clinical expectations. And otherwise, I'm happy to tell a jury, if we have to, that a lot of people thought that the care was reasonable and that we should defend it anyway. So I didn't worry so much about the discoverability and that sort of thing, but that was very odd that we would cross the line between safety and quality in a clinical setting and risk and blend them. So we set up almost immediately, actually, before I even took the job, I set up the seeds to what became known as the Michigan model. And I see a reference to SariWorks in the chat.
Hi, Ravi. Thank you, as ever, for being here.
I want to make really clear that there is a big distinction between SariWorks and what we do. The CRP was founded, to be perfectly blunt, really on a patient safety mindset. And the biggest change the biggest difference and the biggest step to transitioning is a mindset change, that the claim itself will get handled, and will get handled along transparency and intelligent transparency guidelines and that sort of thing. That's to build accountability, and that's to discharge an ethical obligation to the patient and family, those sorts of things. But the primary motivation of the Michigan model is to basically serve what I said at the outset, that if it happened to one, it can happen to others. And our priority has got to be clinical safety, or even in a senior living setting, residential safety, so that we don't exacerbate the problem and shelter people who may be dangerous, or shelter practices that may be dangerous. So we set that up at the University of Michigan. It wasn't easy initially. We have conditioned physicians to believe that they are victims. We have conditioned physicians to believe that when something bad happens, they need to go underground and circle the wagons and not be open and transparent with the patient and those sorts of things. There's lots of good reasons from a claims perspective for those things. I'm not diminishing the importance, but that has to be balanced against the way we have hindered patient safety advances. So just to give you a quick example, peer review is meaningless almost all over the country, in large part because we have this defensive reaction to patient harm. And by the time you work through that and you hire experts who can defend even questionable care, the chances that you're going to successfully employ peer review really go down a lot. Those things, I realized that we were in the way. So we did this at the University of Michigan. I made 62 speeches the first year. Had to tell the every medical staff meeting I could get on that we were there for them. That I did not characterize myself as a patient advocate, but that we weren't serving them well if we were defending care that wasn't up to our standards, measured by clinical measures, not measured by whether I could hire an expert to say what I needed to say. And that the primary goal was to make sure that it never happened again while we were handling the patient and the family in a very highly clinically principled and transparent way.
I can't see the second slide, so I'm gonna move. It
Okay.
doesn't mean you need
Yeah,
to
no,
move
no,
off,
go ahead.
but it's the only way I know how to do it is to do it this way. We're mumbling over here as I'm trying to, there we go.
So
You can either move on.
keep going.
Let me keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
So there's two things that I want that you need to understand from our perspective in the clinical world. And that is, we take in Western society, we really take going to the doctor, we really take medical care for granted. But when you stop and think of what a profound act of trust it is to turn your loved one over, turn yourself over, almost always to strangers, who will then employ sometimes very risky things in your medical care, it's a pretty staggering, profound act of trust. That's important to understand because I've been consulted, for instance, by other industries like package delivery service. The deeper the act of trust to begin with, the greater the sense of betrayal when things go wrong. And the challenges in a package delivery automobile accident are far less complicated than they are in a clinical setting, and I would suggest in a residential setting, especially for seniors who are very vulnerable right to begin with. So that's the first thing we have to bear in mind. And then the second thing I've already mentioned, that medicine and even a residential care and senior living has inherent risks to them. And not every bad outcome suggests that somebody did something preventable or avoidable. So these things have to come together in a system and an approach that is not defensive, that is not reflexively circle the wagons and don't talk to anybody. There are a lot of adverse outcomes and consequences of those things. So what is the problem CRP is intended to fix? Litigation itself has been a very clumsy, expensive, and largely ineffective way of dealing with harm that occurs in these residential, custodial, medical, clinical settings. And worse, it not only doesn't effectuate the goal, that is that it would somehow lessen litigation, all it does is leave patients with no other recourse when in fact our research suggests that they are really looking for things that we are actually denying them. So the deny and defend impulse has been counterproductive and has only encouraged litigation. That was absolutely clear to me as a trial lawyer who has probably cross-examined more than 2,000 people, and in the course of that, asking them why did they seek a lawyer to begin with. And what you find is not the stereotype that we attach to them. They were not looking for a financial windfall largely. They were just looking for basic answers. We all need to be seen when something bad happens to us. They needed to be seen. They needed to know somebody was at least paying attention. And there is a fierce sense of responsibility that they self-impose, that what happened to them not happen to somebody else. By stonewalling and by telling our clinicians to not talk to people when something goes wrong, exacerbates everything. It forces patients into the courtroom as their only outlet. And then it's largely not very satisfying, right? Because the first thing the lawyer says is, I can't make them get better. I can only get you money. That's really all we can deliver. So the whole system I recognized wasn't working very well at all. And it was getting in the way of improving. So we developed the Michigan model, and then what came from that after a lot of research and looking at it in settings other than Michigan, now has come to be known as communication and resolution programs. I don't like that title. I think the academics assign that who are not in the trenches dealing with patients all the time. The reason I don't like it is, first, the whole connotation is that that is related to only claims, and that is not true. We are really focused mostly on making sure that we learn lessons from what happened to the person who got hurt. And secondly, patients really bristle at the word resolution in this title, because they will say, you might resolve a potential malpractice case, but we live with the consequences of these mistakes, sometimes for the rest of our lives. And we know from a really landmark study that the Betsy Lehman Center did that there are huge consequences in the future to patients who have been harmed in their clinical care. I suspect it's even worse in the senior living, where you have folks who are near the end of their life, largely, expect the golden years, and now they have no time to waste, and their lives have been adversely impacted by maybe a mistake. So pay attention to the definition of this CRP, because every word has real meaning. First of all, it's proactive. So we have right now a whole industry of based on litigation, which is almost entirely reactive. We want to know of the bad outcomes, not just the claims. We want to know immediately, because mostly we want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. And secondly, that patient needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to know that somebody's paying attention, and needs to have answers. It's highly disciplined. I've had insurance folks say to me, well, the last thing I want is some guilty feeling nurse coming to the bedside and doing a complete mea culpa. And I said two things. First, how do you know that's not happening anyway? And secondly, in a CRP and a CRP model, that the risk of that goes way down, because we train people in how to know the difference between facts and speculation, how to handle things in a compassionate way, and how to handle things in a very controlled way. It's clinically principled, meaning it's not legally principled. The determinant isn't, can I win this case? In a courtroom, the determinant is really, are we proud of this care? Is this the care that we're all in the business of senior living about? What is our mission? And what is it that we're really trying to accomplish by being in this industry? This is how it differs from SariWorks, which to me sounds more like a customer approval or a customer satisfaction. And I'm not diminishing it, but it is different. And it's different when anybody who's been involved in a true CRP in a clinical setting knows that we all identify as part of the safety architecture in an organization. That's the first mindset shift that has to happen when you get involved in these.
That's great.
So why CRP? Because you can't improve if you're not accountable. When I was a trial lawyer and able to win cases I shouldn't win, the accountability goes way down. And for a variety of reasons I won't go into right now, but for a variety of reasons, medicine historically and literally for hundreds of years has looked to the legal profession for dealing with the fallout from these clinically unintended outcomes. We need to be accountable. When Lucian Leap issued his 1994 article and basically said, it's a call to arms. We are actually causing some of these problems in avoidable and preventable ways. That was a real shock to a community that had for a long time been led to believe that they were the victims of people who were looking for financial windfall. We need to be accountable as a foundation stone to actually moving forward. You can't move forward if you don't acknowledge that you have a problem. So this is why CRP, we can satisfy largely what a patient is looking for by getting to the bedside right away in a compassionate way, listening first. We're not trying to explain anything in the heat of the moment. And then being honest about it, not just with themselves, but with ourselves. To be able to look in the mirror and say, we could have and should have done better in this case. That's the only way we're going to improve. So we can both satisfy the patient's and human nature needs after injury, and do it in a way that actually services and ignites the patient safety mechanism as opposed to hinder it.
Oh, I'm gonna click it here.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yep.
So the insurance case for CRP, I keep pinching myself waiting for the insurance industry to embrace this fully, because the to my knowledge, there is no study that shows that losses go up with the organizations that start CRP. At Michigan, a very interesting before and after study was published by Alan Kachalia and others, and me included, in the Annals of Internal Medicine. I think it was 2010. That was a before and after look at the impact to our claims. And everything came down, everything improved. Our transactional costs dropped. The elapsed time between the injury and resolution dropped dramatically. That's really important, because there is not only money attached to that dragging out, there's productivity loss, there's staff morale impacts, and you are putting other patients at risk in that interim. The faster you can get not only to a resolution, but the faster you can get to some conclusions and move it into self-improvement mode, the faster you will reduce your claims, reduce your patient injuries, and reduce your future costs. Average settlements go down for very common sense reasons, right? There's not a lawyer in this country who represents people harmed who wouldn't take less today than they will 3 or 4 years from now. There are practical reasons for that. To get on top of it ahead of time before both sides spend 6 figures or more in costs obviously gives you a chance to settle cases for lower. But more importantly, the cost of settlement is a proxy for a lot of things that are not hard and fast costs. I can't tell you the number of patients who have said to me personally, well, if Kirk Gibson can get $10 million to play baseball, a game he loves, then my injury should be worth a ton. What they're really looking for is acknowledgement, recognition. They want to know that they've been seen. And that actually has a money figure corollary to it. We always got better average settlements because once you suck the air out of the room with an apology in a case that's appropriate for settlement, you can now have a very evidence-based discussion about what it takes to do your best to right the wrong. It improves actuarial confidence. I think this is something that the insurance industry has overlooked for years. If I can say to an actuary, and I said this to our own, it took our actuaries at Michigan 5 years before they recognized that this was more than just an up and down fluke of litigation. When I can say to an actuary, we would not have a brain damaged baby born in our organization that I would not know about within 24 hours. It would not have it resolved in 2 years. When I can say that, imagine how that impacts things like the confidence factor and the way actuaries counsel their insurance programs to put money away for future harm. What are they worried about? They're worried about that big case that jumps up 10 years from now. That may not be as important in senior living because a lot of those folks may not have 10 years to go, but it's still really important when you look at the cost of insurance and that sort of thing. It refines underwriting decisions. So, for instance, the actuaries were telling the University of Michigan that their biggest exposure was in birth trauma. That turned out not to be true at all for us. And when you start to capture all of these catastrophic cases, you can now better fine-tune your underwriting decisions to the client as opposed to just some national or even international data.
That particularly is important in senior living. We'll talk about the reports here in just a moment.
And then lastly, it positions the insurer as a partner to improved care. There are many insurance companies that will say to me, that's not our job, we're not involved in that. And I have two responses to that. First of all, they actually do that.
Mhm.
Some of them will offer credits for attending risk management programs and that sort of thing. But secondly, why not?
Mm.
Why would they not want to improve the quality of the care of their own insureds? That will inure to the benefit of everybody
Mhm.
and keep premiums competitive.
Great case. You won this case. You've won. Verdict for you.
Yeah, we'll see. So this really was the genesis and I won't take credit for this. This was Skip Campbell, who was our first CMO at the University of Michigan. And Skip was just the most courageous doctor I think I've ever run into. Instead of being cautious, he was convinced of the patient safety benefit. And he basically said to me, by the time somebody gets hurt, the damage is done. I trust that you'll know how to handle that, but we need to know that immediately, and that needs to be the focus of all we do. And without that partnership between the clinical leaders at the university and the participation that I had with what turned out to be a terrific risk management department, this would not have happened.
Bravo on that. Oh, so here we go.
So yeah, what do we do?
What do we do? So with all that foundation and all that learning and understanding about CRPs and Rick's history, we've been conversing and working through a blueprint on how we can bridge the gap from clinical care to senior living. And what I've been sharing with Rick over the many months is that I believe, and we are actually uncovering it, that we can really adapt this kind of model in senior living. And as Ravi points out, I do believe that many senior living organizations, whether they be big, whether they be small, have something in their program baked in. There's something either in their risk management or their adverse, events response system. Something is in there that might feel like a proactive response, but really is not necessarily formulated, or it's not formalized, or it doesn't have a workflow system to it, and it's not really a top-down and bottom-up type of program. So I think that's really what we've been working on.
And you bring up a good point, Rebecca, because if it's inconsistent, if it's transactional, let's say you cherry pick a case here and there because you can see which direction that's going. There's nothing wrong with that, but risk managers have been doing that, savvy ones, for as long as I've been around. There was a program with an insurance company called Argonaut in the 70s where they were doing that. So that's not the novel part of this. The novel part of this is staying principled and being consistent, that your organization has a consistent way of capturing these events and then responding in a way that serves both the short-term interests of the patient and the staff. And the staff's really important in this. And supporting the staff is really important in this, because evidence is inarguable that staff that feels supported and safe delivers better care. And I'm sure that's true in the senior living world too. But you've got to be consistent. You can't be transactional and look at these cases that way.
And I think too that when you were talking about the studies, and we discussed these also yesterday, the study out of, maybe it was Sweden, and there was some other studies, early studies, maybe in the 90s, about what is driving claims. Why do people go? And you've asked probably thousands of witnesses, why'd you hire a lawyer? Well, my expectations management work, as I was sharing with you over these months, is very similar. And I think that also in senior living, and probably in clinical care as well, I can share with you, though, in senior living, it is undisputed and very clear, and the evidence is very clear, that what is also, in addition to the points that you brought out, the principles you brought out, is that really what drives in this particular space, in this ecosystem, have to do with very deep feelings and very deep needs. And in addition to being seen and being heard, it's feelings of guilt, and there are feelings of fear, and there are feelings of worry, and there's resentment, and there are regrets, because we really are dealing with a large large family system when we're coming to senior living. There's a whole system out there of people who are making decisions about their loved one, their vulnerable adult, or their elder that's having a change in their condition and needs better safety, but still wants to be autonomous and wants to take some risks, right? All that balance. But it's a whole family system that you're managing. Those underlying, when I ask those questions, there's a lot of hope involved. Well, I hoped this would happen.
Right.
But there's a lot of guilt. These family members who I've deposed over these years who will testify and say, my whole life also changed when my mom, I was taking care of her, and now she was living with you, and they felt guilty about that. They felt as if like failures as caregivers and all of those, and so part of our program as it stands right now that we're incorporating into the CRP will be really sort of understanding the needs and the feelings and kind of helping define the role of the family during that transition in care. Very, very important part of it. So anyway, I did want to bring that up. So we do face similar challenges in senior living. And we just don't have any kind of standardized CRP framework. It just doesn't really exist. And now I think is the moment to apply these principles. I think now more than ever. And I've got a slide here that talks about the state of risk in senior living and a data-driven wake-up call. Of course, all my notes are at the bottom and I don't know how to get to them. So, but I can only tell you that the average between the Oliver Wyman report, the MedPro report, the Liberty recent report that came out, the Marsh report, the Willis Tower Watson, all these reports in long-term care and what's going on in litigation, CNA's report, they all really say the same thing. They say that litigation is on the right. We don't really, all you need to go do is go to the newspaper. You don't even need these reports to see that verdicts in senior living, elder abuse, in any part of the country, some significantly worse than others, is really these nuclear verdicts. You hear a lot of lawyers talking about them too, are really on the rise. But most of the conversation is about, how do we defend them? How do we defend against these nuclear verdicts? But I think the number one claim along senior living injury claim is between assisted living and skilled is falling. But interestingly enough, even though that shows up as I think it's 275 or 265,000 is the average payout on a indemnity payout on a fall claim. What was interesting in one of the reports, and again, I don't have my data handy, but what was interesting in one of the reports was that even though these were not topping the list of most frequent claims, elder abuse, resident abuse, staff abuse cases were really high up in meeting, even though there weren't a lot of them. And I'm going to prove a point here in a moment. One we talked about something this morning is the indemnity payment on those are very high.
Sure.
250, 300 are average payments. And what's interesting, I think, is, and in all my 30 plus years of experience, is when someone falls and with an injury, and it's obvious, right? And I think those get reported frequently. And that's why we see them frequently. And that's why they're top of the list on everyone's report in long-term care and the State of the Union. But what doesn't get reported are these elder abuse claims, are the everyday events that could be happening, that could be, one or two might get reported, and we may be training our staff to report when we see it. But I think there are probably more unreported abuse cases, whether they're intentional or unintentional isn't the point, but cases that would qualify as elder abuse that are just not being reported. So I think that's important. And I think it's part of a culture. What I've seen is this, if you see something, don't say anything. If you see something, unless it comes up or someone asks for a record, or don't say anything. And I think that's really what we're trying to address, is to create a culture of openness and transparency for everyone. And to one of your earlier points, risk management, safety, it's everyone's responsibility. And unless we empower our staff and everyone in the system, in the ecosystem, who is working in this resident-centric environment, then they don't know what to do really. And most of the reasons I think we're not getting information isn't because people aren't not wanting to share the information, but they just don't know necessarily how.
In these patient care environments, whether it's clinical care or a senior living environment, are bereft with all sorts of other perverse incentives, right? Or challenges, I should say. Financial being right at the top, staffing problems, those sorts of things. What's interesting about the CRP is if you stay focused, if you don't lose the focus on the quality of the experience, it's not just safety, it's the quality of the experience to meet the patient or the resident's needs and desires. If you stay focused on that, the other things fall into place. They're not less important, but they shouldn't be the priority. When you come to work as a caregiver and you're most worried about the financial issues, or if you come to work as an administrator and you're more worried about the financial issues than you are about your residents' experiences, you're already going to have a problem. The other thing I wanted to note, you brought up, and that is we live in this increasingly polarized society, at least right now. Maybe the pendulum will swing, but right now it's really hard. And the idea that even neighbors who are having problems don't talk to each other, they just resort to the litigation, is really sad. But it's an opportunity for us because, boy, when you come into a room in a compassionate way, and even in an apologetic way, you suck the air all out. Everybody's ready for a fight. And it's incredible how forgiving patients and families are once you give them a chance. And that has not changed. And that is also true across international lines.
And I think we see that just from my experiences. I could give you thousands of examples.
Yeah.
Thousands of examples. And so proudly, thousands of examples that I have been part of. So why now? Why now? Well, obviously the rise in litigation, and now we've got new regulations. This is probably something different for you, but we've got new regulations that are going into effect that govern long-term care, that govern nursing homes. We've got brand new framework, higher levels of scrutiny. I think we're more regulated than nuclear energy. And so this regulatory scrutiny, I think, puts heightened experience on, as you put it, other incentives. This is our budget. These folks dole out the money for us to take care of people.
Right.
So we've got to figure out who is really our client. Who are we really caring for, the government or our people? So I think this regulatory scrutiny is really important. Complex family dynamics and resident transitions, as I was sharing with you. Expectation gaps. When I discuss expectations management, one of the things I talk about is the much more sophisticated, more educated consumer, right? As the baby boomers are looking for experiences, and like for me, experiences for my family and my mother and my father and where they're going to live, you have more information, more misinformation also.
That's true.
Okay. And so I think that we have to be mindful that there is an expectation gap about healthcare, both in the clinical care setting and particularly in elder care setting. So I think that's important. Staff distress and high turnover. I mean, it's sort of self-explanatory. And I think what we see is, by creating environments that are open, that are transparent, that are empowering our staff to, again, be able to, not be living in a punitive work environment where if something bad happens, it's going to be punitive, but where we encourage people to come to us and explain to us what's going on and get the help and support that they need. And not just, we talked about this yesterday. This was very important part of our discussions yesterday. And not just the help they need to resolve an issue that happened in care, but the help that they need to resolve, to support them and their own well-being, the staff well-being. Staff, when you're caring for elders, when you're caring for all people, but particularly elders who, let's say, have been with us for a long time, people that you've come to love and care for day in, day out, right?
Mhm.
You're spending your most intimate moments with them. You're learning all about their loved ones and their families and their lives and then, they start to decline and this is very emotional and something goes wrong, someone
Sure.
falls. It was your responsibility to be in the room at the time, whatever it might be, like that kind of mental wellness is really part of our responsibility, I think. And of course, this lack of structured post-harm pathways really just in many ways hasn't materialized in a formalized way in senior living, in my opinion, of, something happens and then what are we doing to try and prevent the next happening, right? So again, why now? These are the reasons that I was able to come up with as to why now. Really the question for me is, gosh, why not before? But I'm here now.
I think it's
So
overdue, but
it's overdue, but I'm here now. So we want to kind of blow by this slide. We've got a few minutes and we want to make sure that we've got time for you guys to ask questions in the chat. But how do you translate these principles? We're going to share these slides with you guys, so you'll have an opportunity to see these. But on the healthcare CRP side, we'll kind of go back and forth. You do this, and I'll do this, and we'll play a little game. Go,
well,
go.
so this notion of early disclosure does not mean, as an orthopedic surgeon once said to me, why don't we just build an apology into every discharge summary and be done with it? That's not what it means. It means getting to the bedside, letting somebody know that you're aware of the problem, that you will get back to them. I do not advocate in the heat of the moment trying to explain anything, because one of the realities in our world is almost nothing turns out exactly the way it appeared when it came through the door. But speed matters both to that patient and family that will start putting the pieces together even without the facts if you don't get to them quickly. And it matters to protect other people and staff sometimes.
Yeah. On my end of things, when I look at how to adapt that to senior living, it really is immediate staff family dialogue, empowering our staff, training our staff to be able to have the resources, the skills and the tools to talk to family right then and there, and not have to go 5 layers up 5 days later.
That's right.
So any root cause analysis, talk to me about that real quick.
So the root cause analysis in the clinical setting is fairly stylized, and it's gone through some different permutations. It's a little bit different in the risk management sense. And I want to acknowledge that Ravi talked about not only the Sorry Works program, but also Candor. Candor is a direct forerunner. It came right out of the Michigan model and the research to that, but it's available to everybody. And the Candor Toolkit was published in 2015. It has a lot of good principles, and I'm glad he brought that up. But the root cause analysis needs to be intelligently shared with the family. I shouldn't say needs to be. Sometimes you may not want to. It's not a necessary thing, but it really goes a long way to healing.
And on our end, this is where I think an interdisciplinary team review, when I'm working with our clients and I'm made aware of an event that happened immediately, hotline-ish or whatever it might be, immediately we get an interdisciplinary review. We get the social worker, we get the administrator, we get everyone who is on the team together. So in a way, and of course we do have root cause analysis in our space too. But anyway, just culture review.
So there are 3 priorities for us. One is the patient centricity. Are we really, when we look at these events, we should be asking ourselves, have we served the patient the way we should? Secondly is patient safety. But thirdly is the staff wellness. That is absolutely critical. And in the senior living, it's even more critical because there are widespread, as far as I can tell, widespread workforce shortages and a lot of turnover. I think you go a long way when you can embrace your own staff and say, we're here for you also. And that's a big part of patient safety.
And I really don't need to add on to that, except to, moving away from the blame state and just offer support. So, and this is the same for us, the legal and human lens.
Yes.
I mean, make sure you're aligned with your mission. And we're going to talk to you about those takeaways here in just a second.
I deliver talks to a couple law schools every year. And when I say to them, has it occurred to you that when you indulge the deny and defense, you may not be doing what's in your client's best interest. The best friend you have is the one who cares enough to tell you things you don't want to hear, right?
But I'm not that person, listen, you know. I'm never gonna do that, ever. You can do that to me, but I'm never gonna do that, because it's never gonna happen. But anyway, so here's what we're up to. Here's what Rick and I are up to. Bringing my hands, okay. So what we're trying to do is work on CRPs and senior living and really adapt and create a formalized model that has 5 core components to it. Obviously early, and for those of you who've worked with me in the past and who are currently working with me, really understand that I've been implementing in some ways so many of these core components. And I think CRP was a sort of a seamless initiative to undertake with me and Rick. Early incident review and triaging, and then this is one thing we talked about yesterday: temporary safeguards to protect others. So while we're in the process, for example, I'm working on a case now while I'm doing some investigation on a alleged abuse in assisted living. You know, it's going to take us 4 or 5 days. What are we doing in the interim, right? What am I doing in the interim about to protect the safety of others in the community and to have some kind of some guardrails in place while we are involved in this investigation? A really key component. Transparent communication with family. We've discussed that over time. Root cause and just culture lens in the senior living space. Documentation and claim strategy integration. This is something we're working on the claims work that I do, and how to create the proper workflow on the claim side of things. And then the learning loop. Maybe you want to speak on the learning loop for a minute, and then we'll open up to questions.
Well, and I want to jump back to the temporary, or maybe we should have said interim safeguards to protect others. Let's take an abuse situation. One of the things you could do, even before you know all the facts, is to make sure that the caregiver who might be problematic is never alone with the patient for the next few days while you're sorting pieces out. It protects that caregiver against other gossip and that sort of stuff. And it also enables you to say to the family later, I want you to know that because we were concerned about this before we knew all the facts, we did take steps to ensure that it wasn't going to happen to anybody else.
Fantastic example.
In terms of the learning loop and the training and prevention, that really changes depending on the clinical issue or the cultural issue. The key is to accelerate that. We talked about root cause analysis, which is a stylized way of looking forward, but it doesn't necessarily look backwards with an evaluative kind of assessment of was the care met our own expectations or not. So we want to make sure that we accelerate that, and the two things have to go in combination. That there are interim steps while we're sorting things out. And then once we sort things out, then we apply lessons learned and test them for durability and efficacy. Because not everything, sometimes you backslide into old workarounds. Sometimes what you think was a fix turns out not to be.
Exactly.
You can't just do it once. You've got to pay attention.
So that's what we're up to. We're going to run out of time here, but you know, I'm going to skip the slide actually, and how to overcome barriers, because that's really kind of the work we're doing right now.
Well, we could talk
a day on this, but anyway, you guys will get the slides also. So that's what's going on. This is again, you'll get an opportunity to see the slides. Rick sort of went through a scenario, and this is one I'm actually working on right now. A fall that has an injury and a CRP informed response. You can kind of read how we would and are handling it. And then that really kind of winds up the program. This is what we're trying to arrive at in the last minute. What we're trying to do and what we're aiming for is to reduce litigation and reputational damage, foster closure for residents and their families, empower and support our staff, and really have data-informed care improvements, ways that we can track, as we were just talking about, that education loop, that training loop, and then creating a culture of safety and accountability. Those are sort of our key goals in what we're working on. So these are our essential takeaways. accountability and proactivity discourages litigation and improves quality. That is really, I think, the equation. You want to talk about Lucian Leap's mantra real quick?
Lucian Leap is regarded as the father of patient safety, and I alluded to his 1994 article that was groundbreaking at the time. But he has always said to me and others, never about me without me. And what he was basically saying is, this is personal to the staff involved also. So if we're going to talk about them, we need to engage them.
Mhm.
That also builds accountability too, if they're part of the fix.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll include a lot of these resources in our takeaways. And then, of course, prioritizing resident care improvement over individual litigation concerns. This is our mission and our key takeaways. So what can you do? Here's the call to action. Really examine your mission. Wherever you are in the ecosystem, I see insurance, I see caregivers, I see risk managers, I see all sorts of folks here. Examine your mission and your organization's mission. Adjust your priorities accordingly, and then shift that mindset as we've been talking about today. So those would be our key takeaways for everybody. We really don't have any time for questions, but you know where to find me. And if you don't, you can find me right here at Rebecca@edelmanfirm.com. This has just been, we have been, and we could talk about this for a really, really long time. We're about to get to work and continue working and continuing this project, and have more updates soon. So thank you so much, Rick. I'm leaving the slide up for just a moment so you can mark the date for July. And Dr. Kathleen Monchi's joining me. What an amazing woman. She's a neuropsychologist who focuses on cognitive decline and really sort of assessments. And so for those of you, well, for everybody, make sure you mark that date for the next Senior Living Empower.
Thanks for
what a
bringing me.
pleasure. Were you gonna bring it in? Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Reach out to us. You'll hear more about what we've got brewing. And again, we thank you all for every which way that you show up in this senior living ecosystem, for joining us today, for taking a minute to really consider your own mission and how you might be able to shift your mindset and your organization's mindset and lead in that way. And I hope this was an informative and really valuable introduction to a new blueprint. So anyway, okay, we're going to log off now. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, Rick, that was it.
Very much.
Oh, it was super fun. Okay.